Margo Robbins is the co-founder. You can walk in front of me. It's fine if you want to. Co-founder and president of the CulturalFire Management Council. She is one of the key planners and organizers of the Cultural Burn Training Exchange that takes place on the Yurok Reservation twice a year. The training exchange program has been utilized across the country, throughout the world, to bring together fire practitioners and to learn and burn together. So I love those two things. T-Rex, it's called, I also like that, is a unique opportunity for new and seasoned fire practitioners to share their passions and knowledge while managing natural resources with the intentional use of fire. They do host a twice annual T-Rex in the Yurok territory and focusing on Yurok culture and conducting cultural burns. She's also co-lead and advisor for the Indigenous Peoples Burn Network, which has expanded to multiple states, including New Mexico, Minnesota, Oregon, and of course, California. Margo is from the traditional Yurok village of Morek, and I probably said that wrong, and an enrolled member of the Yurok tribe. I would also, as a side note, before we bring you up entirely, to say that in the years that we've been learning our way through this, the one thing that I am sure of is that we will not get better and get safer until we center Indigenous voices in how we do land management, which means managing land. It's not leaving it alone. It's managing the land, hardening our homes, and it's not a matter of borrowing Indigenous practices. It's a matter of centering the voices and taking our direction from them, and I am here for it, and thank you, Margo. Welcome.
Thank you. Aikui. Hello, I'm happy to see you all. I would like to recognize that we are standing on the unceded territory of the Pomo and Miwok people, and just to remember that the Indigenous people have been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, taking care of the land. Countless generations of keeping the land healthy and imbalanced. We know a little something about healthy lands and how to keep them that way. What we don't know a lot about, or at least I don't, is how to recover from the wildfires we've been experiencing. And that's because we have no history of such a thing. We did not have wildfires of the kind that we are seeing today. One of the reasons we were able to avoid such disasters is that we used fire as a land management tool. We burned from the high mountain tops down to the ocean. We put our homes and villages in places that the food was close and available, whether that food came from the plants or the animals. In order to take care of those food sources, we used fire. We burned out from the edges of our villages so that the plants would continue to produce an ample supply of food. And beyond that was the fibers and basket materials, which we also took care of with fire. Up in the higher mountains where the men went out to hunt, when they look out at the environment and they see certain cues that yes, this place is ready for fire again, they would light it and then walk off the mountain and the fire would do its work. We can't do that today. because the land is too overburdened with vegetation. If we was to do that today, it would be disastrous. So we're starting from a place that has been abused for 200 plus years. And how do we get back to that place where things are in balance? One of the answers to that is the purposeful use of fire. I know to some of you that might sound scary. Some of you have been through these horrendous wildfires that have destroyed your homes, and it's kind of shocking to think that fire might also be able to save them. When we burned from the high mountain tops down to the edges of our villages and down to the ocean, a byproduct of that was wildfire prevention. The things that feed wildfire, the vegetation, the dead wood debris, when you have a regular fire regime across the landscapes, it reduces the fuel that feeds the fire. Fire is actually really healthy for the landscapes. We burn for traditional foods, medicine, and basket materials. It also improves the water quality and quantity and helps with carbon storage. Up on the top left, you'll see a young man pulling a salmon out of the net. And I was happy to hear the author this morning talking about fire and water because they're closely connected. When you stop and you think about these forest plantations that are planted with trees a foot apart and how much water that's soaking up, or different kinds of brush that have grown unchecked for over 100 years, and you think of all the water that's sucking up. And when we do prescribed burns, we start from the top of the slope and back the fire slowly down the hill. The trees are still standing, but a good portion of the brush is gone. It's not sucking up that water. That water is now reaching the creeks, which is reaching the rivers, which support many different life forms, including salmon. Salmon have to come up the river from the ocean in order to reproduce, and then they go back down. If they don't have enough water, they get gill rot and they suffocate and die. So it's all connected. We're all connected. As humans, we're meant to be part of the ecosystem. We are not supposed to be a part, like separate from it. We are supposed to take part in it. And one of the tools for us to interact with that in the most effective, efficient way is with fire. This is a picture of one of our first burns. We're burning for hazel. In the foreground, you can see the hazel bushes. They have a lot of limbs. We can't use them when they're like that. They require fire in order to send up new shoots for our baskets. In that first picture, you might have seen on the lower bottom, the picture of my grandson in his basket, and that's all made with hazel sticks. You know, I know that probably most of you don't actually personally rely on the forest to gather your food. You get it from the stores or depend on a forest to get your medicines, that you get those from the pharmacy. But you know where your water comes from? It comes from the forests. And without healthy forests, we don't have water. We don't have healthy water. If we don't have water, we don't survive. So everybody depends on the forest and healthy forests, whether or not you live there or gather there. We have several different strategies of of returning fire to the land. This is a traditional, more traditional style of burning. Families taking care of their own gathering areas and protecting around their homes. There are certain months during the year when CAL FIRE don't require permits to burn your property. You don't have to have special qualifications, special equipment, or special clothing. You can go out and burn the areas around your homes. This is me and my kids and my grandkids and my nephew. And this is a little brush patch on a briar patch on the field by my house. And I wanted to teach my kids that fire didn't have to be a big scary thing. The year before, a big wildfire had come through our place, and my grandkids were evacuated from their house. CAL FIRE told them, you guys need to leave because we can't protect your house. And all the people on the hill said, if you can't protect our house, we will. And they stayed and they protected their homes. But they didn't realize how traumatizing, how scary that was for their kids. And so I asked my daughter, I said, you know, I lit up this little piece yesterday. It just kind of burns a little bit. Can I bring the kids out and teach them how to burn? And they said yes. And so this was their first burn. They're 10 years old now, the older ones, and they've done 3 or 4 burns at least. This is a new style of burning that we've just implemented this year called demo burns in an effort to increase the number of people who know how to safely put fire on the ground. We have 2-day trainings. This is a group of Tolowa people. We also offer this to individuals, landowners, because if we're going to make a difference in the fuel load on the land, we all need to take a part in doing that. We can't wait for just the government agencies to take care of it. It needs to be all of us working together, government agencies, tribes, for-profits, non-profits, private landowners, and that, you know, we don't just expect people to be able to go out there and start burning. That would be dangerous. You need to get some experience and training and learning how to do it. And so this is one of the opportunities that we offer. The first day we teach them about how to prepare your land, to put the fire line around it, to have water on hand, the different tools and apparatus you can use. And the second day we'll do a small burn, maybe a couple of acres. This is a cooperative burn that we did with the Yurok tribe. We're a small nonprofit organization, by the way. So we was burning around this elder's house, and as we brought the fire down to behind his house, he decided he wanted to help light. So he came out and helped us light. This fire comes down to within about 8 feet on the back side of his house. His wife's inside watching TV or reading a book or something. And we have fire trucks on hand. We actually have a hose lay up behind his house. And then when we was done burning behind it, we came around the front, and then we burned from the top edge of the front of his house down. And so you can see what these flames look like. And so now after this burn, suddenly he has this barrier of black around his house. And he also has a home-hardened house. And so he is so much safer should a wildfire come. This is what we call a TREX burning. It's a training for firefighters. You have to be qualified as a firefighter. We'll burn about between 30 and 40 acres a day. It's firefighters across the United States and other countries. They come to increase their fire qualifications. They're, for the most part, people who have spent their careers doing suppression, which is very different from doing a prescribed burn. It's really, really hard for them to overcome that instinct to, oh, there's fire, and squirt water on it. It's like, no, don't squirt water on it. That fire's just working its way down the hill. It's under control. And so we want them to understand also that when they come to our home territory to burn, it's a lot more than just fuel reduction. That our cultural lifeways depend on putting fire on the ground. And when they come to help us burn our lands, they're helping to ensure our cultural perpetuation into the future generations. This is just a couple pictures from treks. This was a new fella from over here, from Terra. I can't remember what that. Thank you. So they brought a group of 5 people up to join us during treks, and then they went home and they burned their tule patch, which had not been burned in over 100 years. So all the ecosystems throughout the United States have experienced fire. They're fire adapted. The native people of the land hold that knowledge. So in order to try to return the land to a healthy state, it's a really good idea to make contact with the native people from your area to get an idea of what that state was. You know, post-fire, I hear about these big movements to rush and plant trees back there. And I got to admit, it makes me cringe a little. It's not that I don't like trees. Trees are good. But did trees traditionally grow there? Or was it once a prairie? Because if it was a prairie that has been encroached on through 100 years of no fire suppression, then trees don't really belong there. So let's let that turn back in to prairie. In fact, let's get some native grass seed and plant it back in there so that it'll crowd out the invasives. And then let's start putting fire back onto that prairie on a regular cycle so that it stays prairie. That's centering native knowledge in recovery. You'll notice over here on the right that the fire is actually starting from the bottom, going up the hill. And this is actually the end of the burn, where we have brought the fire all the way down the hill, almost all the way down the hill. It's black on both sides, and this is like the last 200 feet where we get to go down because everything's all black around it, and we get to light it from the bottom, and it's so exciting. And this is after the burn. Up here on the top left is a place that we had already done 2 fire in trees to after 100 years of growth. On the right is post-fire, and you can see up through the trees, there's space through the trees, it's not crowded out with brush. When we first started burning this area, the brush was so thick you can't see through it, you can't walk through it, nothing lives there except bunny rabbits and rats. That's it. Now, deer come back in here. When the young men go out to hunt, they no longer have to go off the reservation because all the places that we burned, the animals love it. The deer have come back. We're trying to grow our prairies so that the elk will come home too. This is about a month post-burn. These plants you see coming up. This here is a plant that will get rid of poison oak. In the middle is fiddlehead ferns. You can pick those little curly things and put them in a pan and eat them. We do that with our little school kids. On the far right is an iris, and that's a traditional plant to make fiber, string, and rope. I'm not sure what my time looks like. Anybody know how long I've been up here? Okay, 3 minutes, good. So I wanted to kind of wrap up with this picture of the bootleg fire. Who said something about bootlegging earlier? Anyway, that's the name of this fire. On the left, they did thinning. In the middle, thinning and prescribed burn. And on the far right, they didn't do anything. They just left it. And this big, blazing, raging forest fire came through this area, burned 400,000 acres in 2021. And this is what it looked afterwards. Places moonscaped in the place with no treatment at all. Burnt pretty bad with thinning only. Relatively healthy with thin and prescribed burn. Now I would like to point out that when you look at this, there is no place in this piece of land that has been thinned or this one that has been clear cut. Clear cut is something very different than thinning. There are timber industries that are trying to use the forest fire as a means to up the scale of clear cutting. We need to cut it all or else it's gonna burn. So when I say thin, I do not mean clear cutting. Clear cutting is really detrimental to the land. This is select cutting. And by select cutting, I don't mean just cutting all of the big trees. A healthy forest has trees of different ages. There's the big ones, there's the mediums, there's the small ones. And that's what a healthy forest is. A healthy forest is not one where all the trees are the same age and they're growing 2 feet apart and they're these tall, skinny poles. This is what a healthy forest is post-fire even. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, my email is margo@culturalfire.org. And thank you for your time.